Hello, welcome everybody to another episode of Arthur's Roundtable. Thank you for listening. We are super happy to have a longtime friend of mine, and I'm going to call him bi-coastal, not bi, but bi-coastal. Uh, we've known each other from all the way the tip and to Montauk to right here in Park City and Utah area. So uh, super happy to have Steve with us today, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Um, he's obviously a lawyer with a law firm, but he's knee deep with lots of entrepreneurs and interesting things. And so we're going to cover a lot of topics today. We'll see how it goes. So, Steve, thanks for doing this. It was good to see you again. Good to see you in Utah a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
and always enjoy it. So, give us a little background so that people understand, at least from a business perspective and personal also, if you'd like, uh, what you're up to.
Well, thank you, Art. This is really exciting. I'm super happy to be here. I've followed your meetings when they were in person. They were amazing, and I tried to come to as many in New York as I could. And it's still amazing. What you've been able to put together. I think when you started this, family office wasn't even a phrase. Like
It wasn't
only a
even a
few.
thing. Yeah,
It wasn't
totally.
even a thing. And
Yeah,
now, everybody says they're pitching to family offices,
I
which
know,
kind
right?
of blows
Yeah.
my mind. But
Well, thank you for
um,
the kind words. It was always nice to have you and have you slide in on your skateboard, right? So,
yeah, I've always been very active. And yeah, I mean, just a word about Utah in the spring. I don't know if there's any place that's more beautiful in the spring.
let's not tell anybody, right? So it is. I was just telling Mary this. We just got back from the Finger Lakes on a lake in New York City on a vineyard that her family owns, and we're okay. We can't wait to get back to spring and summer in Utah. Like yeah, that's how good it is.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
So I had the privilege of growing up in Utah, which I haven't really ever shared on any other podcast
I didn't
before.
know that.
Um,
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah.
yeah, I grew up in Utah, and it's really amazing. It has four perfect seasons, but more about you can go to the Utah Tourist Board to hear more about that.
Yeah.
I'm an attorney. I started my practice um, about 30 years ago. And I got really excited about working with early stage companies back then. I had the privilege of working with the Newhouse brothers. The law firm, they had sort of a captive law firm at the Newhouse brothers founded a company called Condé Nast. That's the sort of most public facing one that people are aware of. But they also owned at the time in the early 90s a lot of cable TV networks around the country, as well as a lot of newspapers under a company called Advanced Publications. And I got a really pretty amazing uh, opportunity to work there as a young attorney. They hadn't really ever hired anyone with less than 5 years of experience at this law firm. And I got to see the Newhouse, Cy and Donald Newhouse themselves pitching or accepting pitches from people's early stage companies. There was obviously a VC industry in Silicon Valley at the time, but it was really nascent. The venture capital business didn't really get started until the 80s. And so this is only 10 years later. And New York didn't really have a venture capital community. There might have been one or two funds. So I've been able to watch the early stage finance world sort of grow up from back then. And I saw some incredible pitches in that office. One of them was Ted Turner pitching CNN. It was really quite an
That's
amazing
wild.
pitch.
Yeah.
With his distinctive accent, he basically said, I'm passing the hat around. Looks like you guys got a lot of cable networks. I have a news channel. I think I have the only news channel, so you pretty much have to give me some money. But I'd like you to give me some money, or else you're not going to have a news channel anymore.
Right.
And it more or less worked. And I sort of saw how leverage could be used even when you were in a place of desperation, which is where Ted was at that moment.
Yeah.
And this is pre-Gulf War. The Gulf War really is what made CNN. So it was an interesting perspective to see that. And since then, I've been able to my career sort of grew up with the internet. And I left the firm and started my own firm in '94, and worked with a really wide variety of internet companies. And I had to sort of tool my law practice to their needs. And their needs were corporate and finance, for raising money and organizing their companies and doing deals with other companies and selling themselves, and also intellectual property, because many early stage companies are software companies or related with the internet back in those days. And since then, it's continued to be like that. And so fast forwarding, I was able to see the sort of rise of the internet from before the web until the crash of the tech stocks in the late '90s, which we just mentioned. I, of course, got crushed. So I had my own near business failure. We had built a pretty substantial law firm of 13 attorneys, zero to IPO, we called it.
Nice.
And there weren't any IPOs after 2000. So we got rid of a lot of people. We had to downsize to maybe two people to barely survive. Probably would have been smarter just to kill it and go get a job somewhere, but we didn't. And we pivoted into mobile content, mobile phone content, and video games, and sort of survived that bleak moment then. And then just just kind of kept with leading and bleeding edge industries. And the fast forwarding, we went through the mobile content rise and then crash in 2006 with the iPhone, which basically crushed all mobile content companies by launching the App Store. And it was a really obvious thing. One year there were mobile content companies, the next year there were not.
There were none because when you own the device, right? It's
The
crazy.
device and the whole ecosystem.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
So that was a good lesson and a good thing to watch. And I stuck with the same firm for 20 solid years. And then in 2013, sold to a larger entertainment firm called Cowan Debates, Abrahams and Shepherd. And then left Cowan after 3 years, built a pretty exciting venture group there, and started a new firm called Masur Griffiths Avador, and exited that firm a couple of years ago. And I'm now at Rains Feldman Luttrell, as you can see on the screen.
Yeah.
And I'm heading up the venture and technology practice group at Rains and having a lot of fun with it. What we're doing is, fast forwarding and sticking with what's happening in early stage, which is AI. We did a lot of work in the crypto years and did a lot of different crypto companies. That market is not dead by any means, and is still in the process, about 10, 11, 12 years into changing all banking and all transactions in the same way that you saw all media move from physical media to digital media.
So when you say crypto, is it crypto blockchain or crypto?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. It's funny in tech, a lot of people just say crypto and they apply that to everything. But what it really means is blockchain technologies. And blockchain, the basic concept behind blockchain technologies also powers AI. So AI has existed for quite a long time, but when it really started to take off is with tokenization. And many AI systems, including the largest ones, work on basic tokenization models for parsing the information. So it's blockchain technologies is super important basis technology, which you can do a lot of things with, and this evolution, I find so many analogies to Web 1 and Web 3. I'm skipping Web 2 because I think the analogies are more direct between Web 1 and Web 3.
Would you say, back to AI being the bleeding edge, is crypto blockchain a close second or a distant second based on the market sentiment and deployment of capital, that sort of metric?
Oh, it's really interesting to me what's happened with crypto blockchain technologies.
Yeah.
I mean, they're almost old at this point. Bitcoin was launched in 2010. So that's quite a long time ago. And we've already seen 4 or 5 boom and bust cycles in the blockchain space. And the market sentiment about blockchain, it's largely impervious to it, I would say. We all, everybody in the space hopes for more blockchain technologies to be adopted. No one doubts that they'll be adopted. They are being adopted. The Bitcoin ETFs are an example of, just the Main Street adopting blockchain. And there's a lot of new services that use blockchain in the background, and that's one of the analogies I would state with the internet. We don't really think about the internet as the internet now. We just think of it as it works and we use it.
Yeah.
We're using it right now using asynchronous and bisynchronous live streaming communications. Nobody in 2000 would have believed that we could have streamed live conversations of video
And it was
without
not,
any problems.
yeah, it's not just the technology, but it's the bandwidth, right? The technology existed to have conversations like this online, but not as efficiently as you can do it now. I mean, it's light years ahead of what you could have done before, right?
Broadcast.com,
Yeah.
Mark Cuban's company.
Right.
We were talking about some of the other companies back then. The predecessor to YouTube was a company called Sudo, and those companies, Real.com, if you remember Real Networks, those companies all were working with thumbnail-sized screens that could only do, I think five frames per second.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So sort of
Like dial up. Yeah.
and that's now we basically have ubiquitous internet. We don't even think about it, and we even think of it as free. We think of this Zoom call as being free. There's nothing free about it, but we
Yeah.
think of it as being free.
Exactly.
And that's one of the analogies. You should think of the blockchain that way. Blockchains are going to be ubiquitous the way the internet is ubiquitous. We won't talk about how the blockchain works or how the blockchain is enabling the transactions we do. We'll simply rely on it to do those transactions.
Yeah. Do you think that it's fair? And I've dug pretty deep during the crypto years and subsequently and some AI stuff now. So I don't want to make it sound like I know what I'm talking about, but the immutable ledger has been around for a long time, right?
Yes.
And so smart people said, well, that could be super useful. Like imagine if uh, your property insurance, your title insurance company could have a mutable ledger knowing who has an encumbrance on that. Like that's like a use case that makes so much sense, right? And then
Yes,
people took it from there and went wild,
yes.
right?
Yes, that's right. Immutability. The other thing that blockchain technologies created is the concept of digital uniqueness. So I could take a screenshot right now and I could share it with 200,000 or a million people, and it would look exactly the same and would be free to do that. So all the business models of Web 2 had to be based on free or subscriptions or some sort of metering technology, something that would deal with the what was then the business fact that there was no digital uniqueness. Anything digital could be replicated in an unlimited way, and that's bad for business in many
Yeah,
regards.
yeah.
That you don't have the ability to sell a unique item, and blockchain changed that. So now there is digital uniqueness, and everything from your car title to a security that you purchase to an NFT that you look at on your screen can all be unique assets on the blockchain.
Sort of like the old word provenance, right? What we associate with art. Like you can distinguish whether you owned it or somebody else owned it, and actually it's real, right?
Yes, and the have we done everything? No, there's a lot still to be done. There's nothing dead about these blockchain companies. Uh, the interface is still difficult to use the way that web interfaces were difficult to use around 2000. It's actually hard to remember how hard it was to
Right.
use. I could go through that, but I think it would be a waste of time on the call because
No.
we wouldn't be able to get to the more interesting stuff. But if you think about how difficult the web was to use in 2000, and I'm talking about after dial-up was already largely gone. How difficult it was in 1993, forget about it, as we say in New York.
Yeah, totally. We've become terribly impatient with a user interface, right?
Now we throw our computer against the wall if we have anything less than 100 gigabyte
Right. Yeah, it's junk.
ethernet.
Yeah, it's total junk. Yeah.
And we have the internet everywhere. We have it on our mobile phones everywhere in the world. I mean, with Starlink, it's really amazing. You can be, floating in the middle of the ocean or at the top of a peak, and you still have fast internet enough to do this call.
It's
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 really
wild.
amazing.
So you'll appreciate this. I was a couple of years ago in Lake Powell on a houseboat with Starlink, and we had everything we needed, right?
Right. And we don't even know how that's changed work yet. We're just in the beginning of that transition, and it's already completely disrupted how normal office work is done. So now we move into the new, which is AI, and AI also, change the way work is done even another level. So I mean, I really enjoy working in the technology space. I've had a lot of fun with it. I've worked also in entertainment, and still work in entertainment. And so those two areas, yeah, I'm really happy that I was able to find those two areas because they've provided just a fascinating array of different interesting issues to work on.
So do you think, as it relates to AI, um, what we've seen that AI agents are what are going to be successful companies as opposed to the big LLMs that those agents use to produce output?
It's very interesting question. I think it's widely believed, and I literally just heard the chief scientist at Google say this, which I think Google is a pretty amazing company. It's one of the biggest companies in the world, and I also think that it's frightening, very frightening, the idea that these big companies, Google and Amazon and Facebook, are the companies that own large scale AI, and that there's no other alternative. Well, guess what? There are other alternatives. I'm going to come back to that, and it's very similar to the early internet. But I think everyone agrees that these large language models are going to be more in the background, and that the interface to them is what's nascent at the moment. Everything is nascent, but the interface is going to be a wide variety of interfaces, and agentic systems or agents are going to be one of those interfaces. And agents will be amazing. I mean, already they're amazing.
Yeah.
The things that they can do on your behalf without you lifting a finger. And that in AI conversations, people are always talk about the fearful things first. I'm actually amazed that you didn't go that direction. But I think the fearful side of AI is human driven, not silicon driven. We sort of animalize AI and humanize AI and make it seem as though AI is going to, adopt the same kind of, monkey brain evil tactics that we adopt as humans. And it doesn't think like us at all. It doesn't even have, we have meat brains. The complexity of our neural networks is exponentially greater than the complexity of anything that's been invented in silicon yet. And how long is that going to take? I mean, this Google engineer was talking about another 11 years or something, which is an enormous amount of time in the AI space. And even then, we're talking about something that doesn't think the way we think.
No, John, it's the as I understand it, the basis of AI is autocomplete. What is the next sensible, logical thing in the process, right?
Yes. What's the next word?
Yeah.
What's the next
Yeah.
step?
I mean, it's
Yeah,
an
that's exactly right.
oversimplification, but that's what the experts claim was the basis of it. What's the autocomplete? And of course, you go to ChatGPT or you go to Perplexity or a lot or any of them, and if you ask it a very simple question and it produces this amazing thing that would take you, while it might be hallucinating or inaccurate, it does it in seconds, which is just beyond. Like it's still amazing to me, right?
It's amazing, but it's a tool. And
Yeah.
that's my one big point is that, this is a tool. Is it a dangerous tool? Yes. Nuclear weapons is a dangerous tool. Mercury is a dangerous tool.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dangerous tools.
Yeah.
And, number two, after inventing these dangerous tools, is always how do we control them? With nuclear, I don't know that we're done controlling nuclear.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
we created NATO.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
kind of fall apart
How's
now.
that
I
going,
guess we
right?
got to guess we got to figure out another way to control nuclear.
Yeah.
And it's the same with AI. AI, I think, should be mostly viewed at this moment as a tool and as a set of tools that we're in the process of building. They're very nascent. They aren't that useful yet because of things like the hallucinations. And they're going to grow and become very interesting, and there will be business opportunities along the way. That's the way we should see AI, more than a fearful way.
Yeah.
Do we
And the
have to
fear, do you
do we
think?
have to control it? Yes, we
Yes,
absolutely have to figure out a
I
way to
agree.
control
So, I mean, there's a lot of talk among the AI people with guardrails and that sort of thing. But to just comment on why I didn't go to the fear thing, it's because I've seen Ex Machina, I've seen Westworld, I've seen that. I've listened to a lot of podcasts with the people who are really smart about this. And so I, not just about AI, but fear sells, right? So it's sort of a sales pitch, right? It's in many, many ways, right? So I think we focus, as you say, on fear, then we'll never get anything done.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And fear is, fear sells. Fear is most often used to control people And that's we focus on these technologies and we don't focus on the other things that are developing around them. That's the other mental break I think that we have in dealing with these. We say, what will AI do when applied to this? But we aren't imagining a world that's also evolving in every way as fast as AI is evolving.
Exactly.
And in
You're
fact,
right.
the world is evolving,
That's really insightful. Yeah.
and everything is changing at the same time. That's what makes life so hard.
Yeah.
Everything, it makes it great and it makes it difficult. You couldn't have predicted the Berlin Wall falling 6 months before it fell.
Yeah.
That just wasn't going to happen. We thought that we had an intractable, unsolvable problem there. It stays like that. The world keeps changing, and AI is changing in the world, and AI is changing the world.
And AI helps AI change quickly. Like we see iterations of the existing LLMs come out monthly, right? Llama has a new thing. Perplexity has a new thing. What the ChatGPT, they're always before you get a chance to arguably catch up if you're not really deeply involved, it's coming out with something new, right? It's really on a fast track.
Really on a fast track. And the other areas where I believe we should be focusing attention, one area that we should focus attention is government. Just straight up the way that we make decisions as large groups of humans. And For most of our history, we've used fear as a way to organize humans. And many places use fear as a way to organize humans, but that's kind of breaking down. And many parts of the way that we make decisions are breaking down. The fascinating anthropological research of the guy whose name I'm going to forget, who wrote the Netflix documentary now is called Join or Die, and it's about the guy who wrote Bowling Alone, and it's about how we don't, that we've changed in the U.S. and in many places. We've changed from a place where people joined organizations like the Kiwanis Club and a bowling league, and a sports team. And now we're sort of like, yeah, I'm not much of a joiner. And most people at this point are not much of a joiner, and don't join these things. And it's how we were able to communicate and make big decisions is by being joiners. And that's now gone. So that's something that's changed. And it's created a lot of problems in our government, created a lot of non-conversation among us individually, where we don't actually talk about the issues because it's rude to talk about the issues. And so, you're a Trumper, you're not a Trumper. If you're not a Trumper, I can talk to you. If you're a Trumper, I can't talk to you, and vice versa. None of this really is going to work for us long term.
No.
And nobody's really looking at it as a science. It feels as though it's not a topic of conversation. But things like DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations, I think provide the beginning of an answer for how we could govern ourselves that is not in a totalitarian way. And we really should be pushing the envelope on those things, in my opinion.
So how would that work?
Well, I've thought of a number of interesting DAO ideas. I've been very involved in forming DAOs in the jurisdictions where they're legal. And DAOs are very interesting. It works based on tokenization. You become a member of the DAO by buying into the DAO. And the DAO, the best DAOs, in my opinion, because it's a nascent technology, DAOs also are a nascent technology. The best DAOs are simple. And the best simple DAOs are a bunch of people getting together to buy something. The one thing that these people have an interest in is the thing that they want to buy, like a copy of the US Constitution. and an original copy of the U.S. Constitution. So they put their money together in the DAO. They buy a token in the DAO. The money is aggregated into a bank account owned by the DAO, and the bank account can go buy the U.S. Constitution. And okay, so how is this group of token holders now going to decide what to do with this copy of the U.S. Constitution that it owns?
So
And
the governance has seems like the governance has to be built in, right?
the governance has to be built in. And what it's created is a lot of new thinking about how to do voting processes, such that they're a lot more, I guess, complicated is one word, but nuanced and able to make the many decisions that would need to be made to, for example, run a company. There are companies that are now run by DAOs. And that is fascinating. You essentially apply to the DAO. There's nobody running the DAO. You apply to the DAO, and the community votes on whether to adopt your job description or not. And if the community votes to adopt your job description, then you're doing your job and you're getting paid. And this is one of the applications of DAOs that I found that I also find very interesting. And I feel like a good idea that I had for a DAO recently is somebody said to me, I'm very interested in the United States National Park System. It's always fascinated me because the park system is limited. The resource is limited, and the number of people using the resource is growing exponentially, such that almost every United States park, almost every national park is overrun by people.
Yeah.
And now we have another
capacity
problem.
issues, right?
Yeah, capacity issues, not enough land, not enough camp spaces, too many people on the trails in the Grand Canyon, just issue after issue of just there's many more of us, and each one of us has an equal right to see that national park if we pay a fee.
Right.
And who are you going to deny that right to be in this place? Who are you going to deny the right to go see the Louvre or the Eiffel Tower in France? You're going to say that's not important for, I saw it, it was important for me, it's not important for you.
Yeah.
So we have these limited resources, and the fact that there are more and more of us is a big problem. And it occurred to me that, somebody said, well, what's going to happen to the parks if Trump fires all the park rangers? and a lot of people are asking these questions. What's going to happen to the IRS if Trump fires all the people in the IRS?
Yeah, not so upset about that, but that's okay. Yeah.
And I thought about the park system as a good, kind of encapsulated problem to solve with a DAO. And you could solve it with a DAO. Anybody who's interested in the continuation of the parks would buy the park DAO or the National Park DAO coin. And you could actually rehire or hire new anybody who was fired by the US government to run the parks. And I think a lot of people would look at the park system and say, well, is that really an absolutely necessary thing for the US government to be doing? Some of us think it's very important. Not everyone thinks it's very important for the US government to be the entity running it. And I think there's a lot of things like that that have become antiquated, and that, really they're doing a great job, like the US Postal Service. They do a great job, but people don't really think of it as a real company. Amtrak.
Same thing. Yeah.
Same thing.
So I have to ask you this. I thought about using AI and immutable methodologies to operate the government and in many ways it makes sense. The challenge, not unlike using your example of the park system, is if you use the DAO on the park system, and let's just call it privatizing it,
Yeah.
sponsored by the government. right?
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that secured the land with their authority, is that the whatever uh, fraud or influence that might otherwise happen with people, the DAO would eliminate all that, which is why the government, the people who run the government now, don't want a DAO making decisions and why they don't want Doge in there, because it would eliminate the opportunity for graft, which is what's happening. And I'm saying that's a good thing. But the challenge would be overcoming the influences of those people who've been profiteering on the back of government. And the pushback would be there. But I think it would be a great thing to dow a lot of the stuff that happens in the government, because it would end up eliminating the opportunity for USAID, for example, right?
Right. If you break down fraud, graft, and corruption, these are deals. It's really communications between humans. In the same way that the yang of that yin, the
Yeah.
positive, is deals.
Right.
So
Right.
the graft and corruption is part of the deal, and then there's also deals that make the whole thing work. Little tiny nuanced deals.
Yeah.
A particular park ranger who there's a deal, and that park ranger is the only one who can do what they do the way they do it, and there's a protection around that park ranger. And each one of these things are really complicated human communications and decisions and deals that have been made to make each one of these institutions run. And changing it to a privatized thing is going to be disruptive.
No doubt.
It's possible for it not to be disruptive, just very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And because what you're doing is wiping away all the old deals that made it work. You're also wiping away the graft and corruption, but you haven't replaced it with anything.
Right.
Graft and corruption are also possible in blockchain systems. We hope that the transparency and immutability will help us, but somebody will figure it out.
People are
We're pretty
clever.
good at
People are clever. Yeah.
it.
No doubt.
So that's the devil in the details, and I think that's the whole reason I'm advocating for more of us paying attention to this. The corporate governance system has been very effective, also old and antiquated and broken in certain ways.
Can we talk about the DAO for a second in a little bit more detail? For example, how it compares to, you want an investor or a founder or a venture company, they have all perfected their interest in a success of an enterprise by by owning shares that perfect their right to prosper or not as a result of that company,
Yeah,
and vote as a result of that, right? So there's all kinds of complicated structures, but by definition, if I own the company, then I can make the rules, right? So if does the voting of the DAO members, is it represented by how much of the DAO you own and therefore how much weight your vote has? I know this probably, I just want to give the audience an idea, because you immediately have deconstructed something that is a tried and true method of perfecting your interest in some success of something, right? Or the trajectory of something. So how does the DAO operate in that way to, like, if I want to buy the Constitution, or maybe you can use a different example, I want to invest in I want to create a company that is organized as a DAO. What how do I influence its direction and decision making?
right. It's the agreements for the tokens are written into smart contracts that are essentially fused in the token, and that art is not very well developed, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's a lot more work we need to do to get to a nuanced level of voting. But the way it works now is that committees are formed. So a good example, really the only great example of a company running on a DAO. There are many companies running on DAOs, and I want to get back to one such company is one of the antidotes to Google, Facebook et al. Owning all of AI development. There's a competitor that is run on a DAO, but they run by committees. So there's an executive leadership committee, which votes on who gets to be an executive leader in the DAO. There's a committee for investigating who we're going to sell this U.S. Constitution to. There's a committee for programming the new products for the DAO. That's how they run now.
All right, so it resembles in some way corporate structure.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, it resembles corporate structure in much the way that TV resembled radio when it first came out.
Right.
That's what we know, and so that's what we do. But I think we're going to develop more, and I think AI will actually help us develop more nuanced ways to communicate around the different issues related to running a company. But the best analogy is the corporate governance model that we have, and that corporate governance model evolved from military, running large military organizations. The board of directors, the delegation of duties by the board to the officers, the delegation of running the company by the shareholders to the board. This is all, we copped all of this from military structures to come up with the limited liability company. And I'm not only talking about LLCs, but all corporations.
No, corporate structure.
And this really changed the world in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I remember reading the history of that. Super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And just getting back to so that's my imperfect answer to your question, which is how are we going to manage the nuance?
But before you go on, decision making, what you said makes sense. Ownership, like perfecting, is it a function of how many tokens I have? Because that would be easy to understand, right?
Yes, you'll see companies issue more than one kind of token. But yes, on a simple level, ownership is a function of how many tokens. So you'll see DAOs launched that are essentially dictatorships, where the people launching the DAO simply withhold enough tokens
all the rights,
where nobody can decide against them.
Yeah.
And that's going to be an interesting new thing, because you think about smart contracts. When I think about smart contracts, I think about invisible English. You want to be able to see the shareholder agreement of the company before you invest in it, or at least have your lawyer look at it and tell you whether it's fair or not. And smart contracts, we don't really have smart contract review like that yet. We just don't have that many people who even know how to read smart contract code.
Yeah.
It's super risky, and we don't have the protections that you have in a corporation.
So do you want to talk about the company that you just mentioned that
that's
could potentially protect us from the wolves?
So here's another analogy that goes back actually even before Web 1, way before Web 1, and that is the pendulum swing between client and server, and the pendulum swing between decentralized governance and centralized governance. So if you think of FAMGA or FAMGAN, Facebook, Alphabet, et cetera, who are the only organizations in the world with enough money to buy enough GPUs to run AIs, and the only companies with enough money to buy server farms to store data. in the desert outside Las Vegas or wherever it happens to be. There is actually another group, and it is the open source community. And if you look at over time, open source usually wins out as ragtag and rebel looking as it usually looks at the beginning. It often and most often wins out. So if you look at Red Hat Linux,
Yeah, remember that? Yeah.
Red Hat Linux seemed very, countercultural at the time. It seemed very much like it was going up against Microsoft and Apple and could not possibly win. And now, if you look at computer systems, the vast majority of you use Linux. And something very similar is happening in AI, where there are open source communities operating on tokens, completely on tokens, that are building alternative AI systems, is what I'll say. So everything from a company called Morpheus, and if you go to morpheus.org, you can see more about them.
I've seen a lot about them recently.
It's not really even a company. It's not, there's nobody there. It's basically just tokens. And
a lot of my friends that were in early stage AI and currently did a lot of work for Morpheus. They basically were mining tokens, right?
Yes.
So before you go on, and this is a nuance, and I want to see if it makes sense and if you agree. The open source worked because people appreciated the work that other developers made, and they could make a contribution to that open source development, and that they could use it for free. And it got better and better and better, which, as you suggest, Linux became the operating system for of choice, because the developer community was invested in it just by virtue of making a contribution in their work, right? Is the example that you're using that it would be even more interesting if the Linux developers got a token and potentially rewarded, which is what you're saying is happening with this AI, whatever it is.
Yes, I'm gonna give it two attributes that make it fascinating. One is, how do they pay people to work on the Morpheus network? And the other attribute is, why is the Morpheus network important? So if you use a large language model written by Facebook or Google, then they can use your data. That's how they've organized their process. And they've disclosed that they're not secretly using your data. They've said, if you use our systems, we have your data and we can use it. They grew this during the Web 2 years when everything needed to be free, because we didn't have digital uniqueness. So they built worldwide systems that use resources that they're paying for by using your data and by selling your data to people or by selling you advertising. And that's how their system works. To change it would be very difficult for them. So, that's the lightest way I can say it.
I understand.
If you use the Morpheus AI alt option, it's all private, and your data is not being farmed and used by Morpheus or its cohorts. And so it's one of the only, and it's not the only one, but it's one of the only resources that allows you to do these searches without Big Brother watching you. And I think that's really important. And I think most people think that it's really important on some level. The way that they finance this is pretty fascinating from a financing perspective. We think of convertible notes and safe notes and equity financings is really the only way to invest in development projects. But what Morpheus did is they created a thing called the fair launch. And the fair launch, it's not that easy to do this, but I'm going to do my best. Basically, you are trying to buy Morpheus tokens. The way you buy the tokens is you buy staked ETH first, something called staked ETH, which is staked Ethereum or STETH. You buy the staked Ethereum, and then you actually just contribute the yield to Morpheus. The yield allows you to buy more tokens. The yield from the more tokens pays the developers who get paid in more tokens. And this is the part that I think is most fascinating for investors. The problem with investing in a startup is I have to put my money in, and then if they're lucky and they sell it in the next 5 years, I'll get my money back. But between now and then, I'm risking my money for that entire time, and I have no control over my money except for what the corporate documents provide me.
So
Scary,
with
high
staking,
risk.
it's the corpus. You don't risk your corpus. I mean, in that it's ether, there's inherent risk, but right?
Right.
Yeah.
So with Morpheus, if I want to invest in Morpheus, I'll buy a bunch of staked ETH and then give the yield to Morpheus in more tokens so they can do all of the activities required in building this infrastructure that they're building. If I become disenchanted or I need to use my money for something else, I can actually unstake and take back my STETH. And now I'm no longer contributing my yield to the Morpheus development project.
So just a nuance. I'm staking my ETH. I get the staking thing. The yield is arguably my money, but house money. It's the yield on my ETH, right? Whatever that happens to be. And am I earning alongside the developers that my yield is financing Morpheus as well? That's
Yes,
my
you're earning.
upside, right?
I missed that part.
Yeah.
You're earning more tokens
I'm
as
not
well.
calling you out.
It was a good call out.
Yeah.
I missed that part.
Yeah.
You are also earning more tokens for staking your ETH.
Yeah. And if I'm going to get this wrong, so I don't care, first of all, but I just want to be clear. I mean, they raised like 300 million bucks.
Yeah, 420 million bucks.
Yeah, it's like insane.
In 5 days. It was really insane. And more companies are doing it, and more companies are attacking the components of the FAMGA AI infrastructure. So you might ask yourself, well, you still have to use Amazon Web Services to store your data.
Right.
Well, no, you don't. There's a company called there's a couple of new companies getting started, and what they're doing is something very similar to the Morpheus setup, and they're actually buying GPUs and selling the compute from these GPUs on the open market.
Yeah. So
in a decentralized and open source way.
Yeah. How does this relate the Morpheus option, right? For example, to the resistance, and understandably so, of large organizations with large data sets that don't want to go into ChatGPT or somebody else's large language model, giving up their proprietary information, so they're building their own LLMs.
I think it's so perfect. We're nearing the end of our time together, and it's the perfect way to end it, because we said at the beginning that we're analogizing to Web 1, and Web 3 and AI have these perfect analogies to Web 1, and this is one of them. All of these companies, this has all happened before. You were there and you saw it.
Yeah.
Companies built proprietary systems. They built their own data sets that they didn't share with anyone, and they kept them inside. And they kept them on rails that they also needed to control inside. Well, I think you're looking, companies like Morpheus and other companies that are building these sort of, you can use it for anything AI uh, platforms. Those platforms, many of these companies over time, they'll start with proprietary and then they'll end up moving over to open source, because the bottom line is the systems built by thousands or millions of programmers are always going to be better than the systems built by 100 or a few thousand programmers.
Yeah. In moving to open source, could you is the technology there to build a barrier between the open source system and that nobody can get my proprietary data?
I'm smiling a little bit because that technology is crypto technology,
Yeah, exactly. Immutable.
cryptography.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Wild. So, without getting, I'm not trying to get, have you offer legal advice, but is like Switzerland, can you build a DAO? You can't do it in the US, can you? Like, what's the jurisdiction, the situs where it's legal technically?
Oh, this is fascinating to me. We have 50 states and we have actually a federation of states here. So the federal government doesn't control everything here. One of the things that it doesn't control is corporations. Corporations are bodies of state law, and DAOs are bodies of state law. So we have a number of states that have adopted DAO legislation. They include Wyoming, New Hampshire, Utah. A number of states have adopted DAO legislation allowing you to create a limited liability DAO in the state. Foreign countries have also adopted DAO legislation. And many, during what I will sort of refer to as the witch hunt years, during which the US government was sort of chasing crypto companies, a lot of companies left the US, and they formed as DAOs or otherwise in other places. And each one of those companies that's formed as a DAO somewhere else is essentially operating under the laws of wherever it is that they're formed. So you can form a DAO in Wyoming, and the DAO in Wyoming has all the rights of any other Wyoming company, including doing business with companies in states where DAOs are not legal or have not been formed yet.
So how does that
Uh,
cross over to the security part of it? So
secure.
like I stake my ETH, the earnings go into a token. I'm buying a token. So am I buying a utility token? Am I buying a security token? What am I buying?
The token, well, for example, with Morpheus, you're buying a More token, and the More token is a utility token that can be used to, it doesn't represent, it's not a security token because it doesn't represent a piece of Morpheus. It is actually something to be used in the Morpheus network, and you can sell it at any time. And a more security-like token would be like the Constitution DAO, where you've bought a fractional interest in the U.S. in one copy of the U.S. Constitution, and that is like a security. It's not a security because it's the U.S. Constitution, but if the token were a token that represented a share in, for example, the St. Regis Hotel in Aspen,
Yeah.
which has tokenized 10% of its shares.
Yeah.
That is a security, and clearly so. So you have tokens that are securities and tokens that are not securities, and it depends on what the token does to make the determination about what it is.
So again, not to have you go on record of what you think of Morpheus or where it's going or what the benefit is, but if I buy Morpheus tokens with my earnings on the staked ETH, am I hoping that that will increase in value? And if so, what would cause it to do so?
That's a hard question to answer, and I'm not gonna fall behind a statement that says I can't give legal advice. Of course, I can't give legal
Yeah,
advice.
right.
Of
I
course,
know.
I can't give investment advice.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
um,
No, I
I
got it.
think
We can skip
I
that for
think
now.
Morpheus. No,
Yeah.
I'll give you the answer. More tokens. I don't think that the attribute of more tokens that you're primarily looking for is that they go up in value. Could they go up in value? Yes, they could go up in value, and then you could sell them and make money. But the primary way that you're making money from more tokens is through the yield.
Got it. And they raised 400 some odd million dollars. Where's that money?
That money is in the More network. It's in the tokens, and to the extent that it's all still there, remember you can withdraw your staked ETH.
Right.
So if at a moment in time in 2024 they made $420 million, they sold $420 million worth of staked ETH that was then contributed to the More network, that number may have changed. People may have actually unstaked their
Okay,
ETH.
so that's really an important distinction.
Yeah.
They didn't raise $420 million based on the earnings of the staked ETH.
No.
420 is so it's really not their money. It's my money that I staked. It's
Yes.
hypothecated.
That's right.
And so the money that's going into the Morpheus token is the earnings on my stake. I get it. Okay. That makes a lot more sense, right?
Yes. Yeah. And my bad for not having better explained it
No,
earlier.
no. It's a complex thing to start with, right? But yeah, super cool. Yeah.
And that last statement is exactly why I'm doing this. It's super cool that to be
Yeah.
constantly dealing with these complicated new issues.
And do you have a sense? I'm sorry to go down the rabbit hole on this, but it's fascinating because I've been exposed to Morpheus, a few months ago, and now I understand it much better. Is the is there an opportunity to stake more ETH, or did they cut it off?
There's an opportunity to stake more. The same web page is there as was there in March of 2024.
And then there's a committee to decide what needs to get done to reward the developers with the Morpheus token.
Yes, there are. It's based entirely on voting, and I would need to defer to some of the they don't even nobody there will ever admit that they're in a leadership position, and they probably are not. I mean, the basis on which they built this thing was completely egalitarian. You buy in, you do your work in exchange for more tokens, you get your yield for having invested in more tokens, and the decision making, for example, I think it would be difficult to sell something to Morpheus because there isn't a committee to decide whether or not to make such purchase. And that committee would then have to be formed. So this is the difficulty of DAOs. How do you form all the committees that need to be formed in order to do all the things that you need to do? For the development, because development is, I don't want to call it hierarchical, but it's hierarchical in the way that film production is hierarchical.
Right.
Everyone knows what a grip does. Everyone knows what that role is, and it's that way with devs. So they can actually put out the equivalent of an RFP and say, this is what we need. And then a bunch of devs will put the application in and say, I want to do that piece for you if you pay me in more tokens. So that's more or less how they're getting the development done.
Fascinating. Yeah. So this is just hearsay, but there is somebody that people know who created this DAO, and based on his reputation and knowledge, is partially responsible for the willingness of people to stake.
That could be. That could be.
And I don't know this to be fact, it's just what I've heard. And so,
A benevolent a personage who
yeah,
people trust and
yes,
who seems to be trustworthy. I've found him to be trustworthy.
good. And so I'm not asking because I want to understand him or anything, but I want to understand the structure. Like if I create a DAO and it's not a dictatorship, do I stand to prosper as if I was a founder of a company?
I mean, it's too general the way you've asked the question, but
Yeah.
if you created the DAO and then you retained a bunch of DAO tokens for yourself, then you could prosper the way the founder of a company prospers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would argue that it would need to be disclosed.
Of course, disclosure's king. Yeah. I may not like what you're doing, but at least you disclose it to me and then I can make a decision. If you didn't disclose it, that's kind of fraud. Right.
Fraud, right?
Yeah. Super cool. Yeah, I love it.
Are there problems? Yes, there's problems, and many things that I have not yet figured out.
Yeah. Is that is the idea of creating a company financed with people investing in tokens kind of gone by the wayside, or are people still creating their own companies with tokens and financing things that way?
Um, I'd say that it has not gone by the wayside. There are still companies. The thing that's gone by the wayside is something called the ICO,
Yeah,
um,
the old
and
days. Yeah,
and that seems to have gone by the wayside. There are new tokens being launched. They're often not launched in the same way that they would have been launched during the ICO days. And I think that's an evolving area. How do new tokens get launched? Venture capitalists like tokens. We did a pretty brisk business. We do a lot of fund formation work, and we did a pretty brisk business of helping with that problem when people had raised venture capital funds and their LPs were banging down the door for them to get some of this instant liquidity token alpha. Let's put it.
yeah,
They came to us, and we had to sort of redraft documents, reform companies, do whatever was needed to make it possible for them to deploy that capital in tokens. But I don't think that there is sort of 100% trust in tokens. There are very few VC funds that invest only in tokens, although they exist. They exist primarily in crypto, and stick with the crypto ecosystem for the most part. There are still regular financings, safe note financings, convertible notes, seed rounds. The uncertainty in the market is really hurting that. And it's very interesting. Will they disappear off the face of the earth? I don't, at this moment, I would say no. But something like a recession could cause them to disappear off the face of the earth. I think before the call started, we were talking about the ringtone business. And I mean, ringtones and mobile content that existed in a moment in time for a reason.
yeah,
Venture capital funds were not making bets at all
yeah,
after the tech stocks crashed for a long time, a year, 2 years. They didn't make any bets. And so entrepreneurs, out of desperation, started working on products that you could sell for 99 cents to try to make revenue however they could. And that's why that whole mobile content boom happened.
And it was an economic reality that caused it to happen. So, if we were to slide into a deep recession, would all seed investments stop? Gee, I guess it could,
Good.
but it seems unlikely to me because so much of our R&D, we've sort of decided to trust investing in small companies as our path to R&D, much more than investing in Unilever or some large company to develop new products. So I don't think it's going away, but tokenization, I suppose, could take it over.
Yeah. We it's a small sample set, but we see a lot of deal flow, we see a lot of companies, we see a lot of funds, and in the context of them raising money, and we do see people writing checks. It is about 50%, which is not a stat that I can support empirically. It's just sentiment that I've seen. Uh, that there's still money out there, still people deploying capital. So it's kind of interesting. I know you have to go. I have to go. This has been super interesting. And
Beautiful. Yeah, I'd love to
really,
do it again. This has been
yeah,
really great.
we can definitely do it again. And so thank you, Steve. Super
Thank
appreciate
you. Have a
it.
beautiful afternoon.
You too. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, bye bye.
See you soon. Bye-bye.